I'm going to give you a little glimpse of how the 18th century piano tuners heard major thirds. And I use a major third as an example because the major third was the most important interval in terms of key coloration for them. And I'll start with the E above middle C, and this is equal temperament, so I'm playing an equal tempered major third. They wanted to hear a pure major third, because this type of third is far more harmonious than well, what you heard on equal temperament. Though they didn't tune equal temperament at the time, they just loved this sound. This was the aesthetic known as the Baroque tempering philosophy, and they didn't just tune one third that way. They wanted as many thirds as possible to sound like that. So the various tuning systems they use, or the various versions of the tunings that they use, they always wanted to get as much of this pure sound. And since they used the diatonic keys earlier on in history, that is, the music was written more or less in the keys with either no accidentals or few accidentals, these thirds, they tune them on these intervals, or in those keys, like C major or G major or F major. Result of that is, if I try to tune another third, and just to back up for a second, we have one octave over here. The octave is already tuned. I tuned the first third. I'm just going to tune another third pure, that is the G sharp to E, in the attempt to tune as many of these thirds pure, to get rid of those beat rates. Okay, that's pretty close. So we have two thirds here. That leaves us a final third that has been tuned by default. Now, this final third has a very different quality than the first two thirds. And so that was the first type of tuning that they did. This is just a schematic of a tuning, just one octave, what you can find with the major thirds. That tuning was known as the old tuning. This is the 18th century we're talking about here. So those are two major thirds that are very close to pure. It doesn't matter whether you can hear the beat rates, but you all have heard some sort of change in quality, haven't you? All right. So that was the first solution to tuning. This tuning system, known in the 18th century as the old tuning, we have the modern term called mean tone temperament. And prior to the 18th century, they called it the common tuning, or the vulgar temperament. This tuning system ran from middle 1500s to the middle of the 1800s in usage. The second tuning that we see in the 18th century, or the second solution to their problem or their issue, which is how do we tune, how do we create musical resources, or resources for our music, was to, as they needed more and more keys, or they wanted keys that were more usable or less extreme, was to keep that first major third pure sounding, similar to the old tuning, and widening the middle third. So the middle third is roughly what we have in equal temperament now. Now I should back up a little bit, because regarding equal temperament, as I was defining it, I wanted to add a few more things to that definition of equal temperament, which is that in equal temperament there is one, in modern equal temperament, as we define and practice in the 20th century, there is only one equal temperament. There are not various versions of equal temperament. There is one. there are no color changes. That is, every single interval, every major third, no matter what register it's in, is the same width as every major third in the piano, every other major third. This is equal temperament too. This is the same. The vibrations may be quicker, but the relationships are exactly the same. When you have intervals, thirds in a piano where the relationships are identical, as we define in equal temperament, there's no change in quality or color. That is how we practice it. And that, of course, goes for the major sextants and the fifths and the fourths and every single interval. Everything is equally tempered. The other thing about the Baroque tempering philosophy was that they believed that, in the Baroque tempering philosophy, that since the fifth was higher up in the harmonic series, that it could bear more tempering, which is a complete opposite of what we have in our 20th century and in the 21st century practice of equal temperament. The fifth in equal temperament is very close to pure. Because of that, there's no key coloration in equal temperament, and therefore, if you listen to just do this over here. These intervals that I've altered. This is the first triad with a major third that I made pure. This is a second triad. That is key coloration. Each major third has a different width, and each major third has a different quality. This is the new tuning. So all the keys with either no accidentals, like C major, or F major, G major, with fewer accidentals, fewer number of accidentals, have that pure sounding quality. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. We're going to now define equal temperament, look at the definition of equal temperament by an expert in the end of the 19th century by the name of William Staunton. He defined equal temperament, just to summarize, because we won't read through that definition now. He defined equal temperament in terms of the mathematically precise definition that I just gave you, but then in the beginning part of his definition, but then as you read on, he offers you a definition of equal temperament based on 18th century tuning. Now, according to our modern definition of equal temperament, that is not possible, because as I stated, by definition, there are no different versions of equal temperament, and there's no key coloration. So this definition is very revealing in that what it tells us is that the terminology in the 19th century was equal temperament. They said all the tunings at the time, they called it equal temperament, but the practice was something else, because we have other types of evidence and research to base us on that. Scientists such as Alexander Ellis did various experiments to determine what piano tuners were tuning in the end of the 19th century, and they still weren't tuning equal temperament, even though music writers called everything that was being tuned equal temperament. They called the well temperament, which is the new tuning, and some mean tone temperament as equal temperament. So that explains why we read that Bach and Chopin were equal temperament composers, because according to the definition in the 19th century, yes, Bach did use equal temperament according to that definition, and so did Chopin, but it's not the equal temperament we use apparently in the 20th century. So therefore, what that points to is a need for new terms. And the terms are well temperament and mean tone temperament.